This season, the Weber WBBL turns 10, and Week 1 has turned it on.
She's going for it. She hits a boundary at 15 years of age. How good is that?
This may well be the breakout season for, well, breakouts.
Grace Parsons with her first wicket in the WBBL, and it probably doesn't come much bigger than that.
All of this in just a few days, and still so much cricket to come. This is The Surge. Yes, hello everyone, and welcome to the Big Bash's very own podcast, The Surge. I'm Adam White, and I'm joined by Kirby Short as my co-host for the very first episode. Kirby, welcome.
Thank you, Whitey. Pleasure to be here.
The WBBL, it's back for another year. How exciting is this?
I love this time of year. It's about October when you just start getting excited about the possibility of this world-class competition rolling around.
And it's the 10th edition of the WBBL. Now, you've been central to it for so many of them. You've captained the Heat to 2 titles, so you know what it's all about. What about those early days?
Yeah, remarkable to think that it's 10 seasons ago that we were jumping on red-eye flights, playing 2 games in one day. You change venues in the middle of it, a little bit like Premier Cricket, to be honest. Your clothes didn't fit and there was no broadcast.
Yeah, and it's very different to what it is now. And then even as we've seen through the first few games of WBBL 10, the emergence of the youngsters, it feels like that's the flavouring, or at least the start of the tournament.
There's some wonderful stories of kids really that were watching their idols in those early days, and they're now part of the competition. And if you want any more endorsement than that, I don't think you're going to find it. The idea that you actually are creating a pipeline, a pathway within Australia for those young girls to aspire to be part of a world-class competition.
Absolutely. Now, our very special guest on the first edition of The Surge is Sophie Devine. It's pretty special that she's coming here because she's actually just coming from the airport now. She's won the World Cup with New Zealand as captain. She's then gone and played some one-day internationals against India, and then she's coming here and then will play in Melbourne for the first time for the Scorchers over the course of the weekend. We don't want to embarrass her too much. So before she gets in here, how special was that Sophie was able to get that title?
Oh, there's such great affection for the Kiwis as a team, I think. And, I mean, you can't deny the storyline of Sophie Devine and Susie Bates. They've played 9 World Cups together. They've been so close if it weren't for the right boot of Elise Perry all those years ago. So it's a fairy tale.
Absolutely.
Simply a fairy tale.
Yeah. So Sophie will be in here. We've got plenty of segments to go throughout the course of the podcast. It is our first one, so hopefully they all go well. But we're going to start with a power play, which are pretty much the headlines that was through the first week of the tournament. Each week we'll go through all the different, headlines and also the issues of the game. But as I said at the start, it feels like the first week has all been about the youngsters. Is there a reason why that's the case? And are we going to see more of it as the tournament progresses?
It has been the story of the youngsters. I mean, you could start listing names: Kiva Bray, Chloe Ainsworth, Phoebe Litchfield. She's a known name to us, but she also is now the youngest captain ever in the WBBL, so that's a whole other storyline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Innes McKeon, Charlie Knott, the list goes on. And I think why? Maybe because early on in the competition, some of these new up-and-coming stars are a little less known to the rest of the competition. There's no fear. There's all opportunity, so they can kind of just go out there and do their thing, and we're seeing all of that talent on display.
Hitting the ground running, one of the reasons it has been because of the Spring Challenge, which is the new initiative from Cricket Australia where it's essentially a lead-up tournament, the entree before the main course. Were you a fan of it as a concept and then as it unfolded through the first edition where the Hurricanes won? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, to be honest, I wasn't quite sure what to take from it. I think knowing that it's branded as the WBBL, but then the absence of the Australian players and the international players, I wasn't quite sure what that would look like. And I've been pleasantly surprised, I think, by the outcomes of that. Speaking both to players but also to coaches in particular, the likes of a Charlotte Edwards who doesn't operate within the domestic structure, that gave her a chance to have a really good look at some of those other squad members that she otherwise might not know how they'll perform under pressure.
Yep.
Someone like Jude Coleman with the Hurricanes, who actually has a really consistent domestic squad that moves straight into that Spring Challenge opportunity, but she's tweaking plans with that group. Luke Williams, he no longer works with South Australia, so he actually comes in cold now just to the strikers environment. And every coach, whether they're part of the domestic setup or completely outside the domestic setup, were really excited by the opportunities it gave them in that competition.
And we see at times with the WNCL, when the Australian players aren't playing, it is the opportunity for the youngsters to make a name for themselves and give themselves a bit of a reputation. I think it kind of happened through the Spring Challenge as well, which, because it's so close to the WBBL, it gives them, I guess, that momentum going into the real stuff too.
Definitely. And I think if the coaches are making choices about the team, it's the players that are also getting that belief in themselves. Sienna Ginger was one that really stood out across that Spring Challenge period with bat and ball. And yes, she might be an under-19 Australian representative, but not necessarily fully known across the country. And Mark Sorrell with the Heat, he now knows exactly what that looks like, what her role might be, and she knows she can perform under pressure. And you could list 6 or 7 other examples across different franchises where that was true as well. So a really great concept, a really great competition, and I think it served purposes for players but also for coaches.
Absolutely. Okay, headline number 3, that your team, the Brisbane Heat, they've started very well. I know it's really early in the season, but they have set an early season marker.
They certainly have, and I think they'll also be conscious that they started really well last year as well, won 7 out of their first 10 games and actually lost a bit of momentum at the back end as well. They'll be pleased with those first 2 wins. It's a condensed schedule.
Yes.
We now have 10 games, so that's a real feature as well. Grace Parsons, leg spinners against the Renegades, she was outstanding, but I'm really quite excited for the Heat by the addition of Shika Pandey.
Yep.
I think she potentially is a missing link for them, particularly with the new ball, options in the surge. She's the point of difference at the moment. I think just adds a little bit of depth and something different in their bowling lineup. But T20 cricket is so volatile. They've started well, but there's certainly a lot of talent and a lot of teams that are maybe sleeping giants at the moment. So really looking forward to seeing how the season unfolds.
Is it too early to have a favourite? It does feel like it's a very even competition. It was last year. I mean, you could have thrown a blanket over about 5 or 6 teams that even just to make the finals. But do you see it that the Heat may be the ones to beat, or too early?
Yeah, I think it's too early to call. I think if you asked anyone in the world if New Zealand would win the T20 World Cup, I think most people would have said no. I think tournament cricket is tough. T20 cricket is even more unpredictable. So I think the less emotional waves that you can ride, the more successful those teams will be. Who that team is, you couldn't possibly say at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, there are 4 overs in a power play, so there are 4 headlines. And the last one is Elise Perry. What she has done to start the tournament has been, well, I was going to say quite remarkable, but she's been doing it for a very long time. But it would appear that it's not stopping anytime soon.
No, it isn't. And I think you look at how she's iterated herself across her career, and that's what makes her the incredible player that she is. I think it's a temperament, isn't it? It's not just a skill set. It's not talent. It's actually the fact that she's prepared to find new ways, different ways to do things. And there's a relentlessness with how she approaches those incremental improvements. And yeah, we shouldn't be surprised, really, should we? She's got the golden bat at the moment. She's tied with a few other players with 4 wickets for the golden arm as well, striking over 200, the only player to be up in that echelon at the moment as well after a couple of innings in the season. So you have to admire how she just continues to get better.
The superstars do exactly that. They keep getting better. They keep redefining themselves as athletes. Have you noticed anything different with Elise to start the new year? You just touched on the strike rate at 200. I wonder whether that might be part of why she's going so well and maybe something a little different. But what have you noticed?
It's actually really interesting watching her bat the other day and also with ball in hand at the top of her mark. She's known for finding those 1%ers, and I actually noticed a really consciousness about her breathing, almost this kind of reset thing that I haven't actually seen her do before. And I noticed it both when she was at the non-strikers end, when she was batting, and at the top of her mark when she was bowling, which sounds really little and small, but I think she's now at the stage of her career where she's looking for those tiny little things just to focus her, centre her, bring her back to that moment. So I wonder whether it's more of a mindset shift, and then that enables that freedom that we see with lofted cover drives within the first 5 deliveries of her innings.
Yeah, it's great to see Elise starting the year so well. Okay, as Kirby just said before, it's hard to pick a winner this year, but don't forget you can log on and get involved in the BKT Big Bash tipping competition, all you've got to do is actually download the Big Bash app to enter, where you can win $1,000 a week and an overall prize of $10,000. I promised that we had Sophie Devine. She is here. Do we bring her in?
Absolutely.
Sophie Devine. She'll join us next. This is The Surge. All right, it's time for our first special guest on The Surge, and it doesn't get much more special than this. Sophie Devine, welcome to The Surge.
Thanks for having us. Pretty honoured to be the first guest.
Absolutely. Do you actually know what country you're in at the moment before we go too much further?
Not a clue. It probably feels a little bit like a plane still, actually, to be fair, so I apologise already.
It's a bit like being on The Amazing Race, what you've had to do over the last couple of weeks particularly.
Yeah, it's been pretty whirlwind, to be fair. I think it's probably 3 or 4 different countries now in the last 5 or 6 weeks, but it's the nature of, I guess, the way the schedule is, and yeah, happy to be back in my second home of Australia.
If I say to you, you are the champion, the women's champion, the captain, the T20 captain of the world when it comes to T20 with what you've done over the last few weeks, how does that make you feel?
You've probably stitched me up because I'm jet lagged, tired and emotional still, but look, it's so incredibly special. I don't actually think it's quite sunk in yet. It sort of seems a bit weird because it was, well over a week ago, but we obviously went straight into India, but just it still doesn't feel real. I think my whole career, that's always what you're trying to achieve is World Cup wins, aren't you? You want to be the best in the world. And to be able to say that, there were a couple of quick jibes that we've sort of been launching as a team, we can do this, we're world champs and whatnot, which is really nice to say, but it's just still such a surreal moment that hopefully when I get a bit of a breather can really, lap it all in. The girls are heading back home at the moment, and New Zealand Cricket have done a great job. They've got a bit of a trophy tour going on, so they're travelling around the country getting amongst, fans, friends and family, which is awesome. But obviously I missed that to play in this, but yeah, I'm sure at some stage I'll have a breather and sit with my medal for a little bit and enjoy it. I
mean, 9 T20 World Cups that you've played in to actually, as you get towards, you might play for another 5 years, who knows, 10 years. But to actually reach the top of the mountain, I would imagine for you personally, that would be enormously satisfying.
Oh, hugely. I think, we obviously got pretty close when I first started out in 2009, 2010 alongside Suze to make the finals, and then had a bit of a lean patch. Obviously 2016 was our last semi-final appearance, and I thought we were a great chance in that tournament too. We had a great team, we were playing great cricket, and we got bundled out by West Indies and a couple of players, Brittany Cooper, who, in all honesty, didn't do too much. And then she scored a 50 against us, knocked us out. So it was 8 years in between, I guess, finals appearances. And then to be able to go all the way, it's still really surreal to say that. And it certainly will be when I do finish. And trust me, I won't be playing in 5 years' time because I'll be in a Zimmer frame and someone will be wheeling me around. But it's still such a cool thing because, as I said before, it's what you set out to do. You want to be the best in the world, and to be able to have that by your name, I think that's something that's really cool for me, is that's never going to be taken away from me now. It's not just a World Cup player, it's a World Cup champion.
And Kirby, before you let fly with all your questions, just to you, to be in a situation where Sophie has actually won the World Cup, how satisfying is it for you, considering you've played against her, you know her so well, that she actually now has got that trophy on the mantelpiece?
Yeah, it was so interesting watching from afar, actually. I think there's such respect for you, for your team, the way that you go about it, the humility that you go about it with. And I think it was almost that all of the other countries, we didn't win, but we're really pleased the Kiwis did. That was the overarching sense that you got from even the likes of South Africa that you did in the final. I think the Australians the same, the outpouring of emotion from other countries. I think it just speaks volumes for respect is the word that comes to my mind. And there's this pride that I feel, and I'm so disconnected and so far away from it, yet you watch the stories, you watch the journey, and you can't not respect the distance that you've travelled and what you've done. And I think for me, that serendipitous nature of Katie Martin being in the commentary box as well, I think there was this lovely bow wrapped around the whole experience. Her calling that moment, particularly for you and Suze, was just special. So congratulations.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
You almost got her to cry.
I know. I think she's jet lagged.
I'm not sure at the moment. It could be.
So why did you win it? We want to get on to the WBBL as well, but why did you win it? Because the form coming in wasn't too flash.
It's really funny. I've had a chat with a couple of former coaches they've asked the same question because one of them was involved in the White Ferns and now is coaching a men's team, and he sort of said, what's changed? What was the shift? What happened? And I said, I genuinely don't know, because I've really felt that the messaging has been so consistent over the last 18, 24 months. We've had a very young squad since Com Games. You know, we've obviously been very vocal about the fact that we lost a lot of experience when we lost Amy Satterthwaite, Katie Martin. We sort of went into this, I guess, this new phase of trying to blood new players, and form was not great going into it, but I think that's probably just adds to the whole story of it as well, as we lost 10 on the trot. But I think sometimes you have to look at that in context. We were playing against Australia and England. It was funny when we played England in the warm-up game to the World Cup. That was the 17th time we'd played them in the last 12 months, I think, which when you think they're, the number 2 ranked side in the world, well, of course you're going to have some pretty tough results into that. So I genuinely don't know what it is, and it's something that's part of my, I guess, reflection piece, is to figure out what was different. But I guess the biggest thing that I noticed from the small amounts of reflection that I've been able to do is the growth of the younger players, not just on the park, but off the field too. You would have seen Georgia Plimmer's outstanding performance of Don't Stop Believing in the changing rooms after the final. And she's like that now, you know, she has been for the last 6 months, which for a player that has had so much scrutiny on her, for a 20-year-old kid who's opening the batting for New Zealand and has, you know, not had the performances that she would want mostly, but to go out there and to absolutely carve it up. She's had this confidence off the park too, and she's a quirky kid. I mean, I absolutely love her to bits, but to see her so comfortable in her own skin off the park, I think that's what's contributed to their success on it. And I look at Eden Carson as well, as she's an absolute fighter, and I don't say this in a rude way, but she's an absolute mongrel. And I absolutely love that about her, and she's really embraced that and embraced the competition and how much of a competitor she is. So, you know, those two really stand out for me. Izzy Gaze is another one. I mean, keepers they're a unique bunch. I mean, we both know Katie Martin. We all know Katie Martin and how unique she is. But for Izzy, keepers don't get the recognition they deserve. You don't talk about them when they do well, and you only talk about them when they've, you know, make errors or whatever. So it's, for me, what she's been able to do with the gloves in a really tough conditions, I think that's something that stood out to me during the World Cup, is how well she performed. It was with the bat as well. It was the little cameos, the little wee knocks of a 12 off 8, and that's something that we've spoken at length about as a team. It doesn't have to be a 50 or a 60. It can be a 20 off 10, a 16 off 12. That really adds momentum. So those little performances, how comfortable they feel off the park, I think it's just sort of seeped through, and fingers crossed we can keep that momentum going now.
Spoken like a true captain, isn't it? What have you learned about yourself? So if 9 World Cups, you've hit that pinnacle, you now hand that captaincy over. What have you learned about you across that journey?
It's really funny because if you asked the group how I was throughout this tournament, they would have said I was a real sook. And a little bit more, emotional, I think. And that's not to say that I wasn't emotional before, but I think the gravity of the situation that this was going to be my last T20 World Cup as captain, I really wanted to embrace that and to share the love, I guess. I feel like I was getting stitched up. Every interview I did, they were trying to make me cry. Similar here, you know, they must have had a bet on or something to see who could bring the tears on, but it really made me reflect and think this has been such a cool journey for me, and I want these teammates, friends, you know, such important people in my life to know how much I love and care about them as people. And you know, they probably got a bit sick of me giving them cuddles and hugs and, you know, telling them how proud I am and stuff of them. But that was something that I guess maybe it's not a regret, but maybe I could have opened up a little bit more. But you'll know, Curbs, like captaincy is such a fine line between keeping your distance and maintaining that, not that aura, but just that buffer, because it is tough, because, you know, you're having to make some really tough calls. And yeah, how do you get that right? I don't know if you ever know, but certainly for me, I think the last probably couple of months, I've probably opened up my emotional side a bit more, and whether the girls appreciate it or not, I don't know, but I don't care. We won a World Cup, so.
I want to jump in there, Kirby, because you've won 2 titles as captain of the Heat. That captaincy piece about, as you said, sort of keeping your distance but also being part of the team and wanting to be friends as well as teammates. How did you do that? Because captaincy in T20 is so important.
It resonates so strongly, actually. I think that's one of the reflections I have as a captain, that on one level, being a really regulated human is really beneficial in those pressure situations. Anyone in the team can look to you and they know what they're going to get. You're not going to bounce around emotionally. The contrast to that is that you don't really fully show what you're feeling, and sometimes that's what people need. And as you were talking, I just thought, yes, that's exactly how I felt. And what I don't think I did particularly well, or as well as I could have, is shared more of myself during that time, because I was so worried about being the person, the steady hand, less emotion, more self-control. And I look back and go, wow, I actually could have given more of myself to my team. Not that they didn't know me or trust me or any of those sorts of things. I just think that that was something I could definitely have done better. And as you were talking, so the thing I think that's most exciting is you're still part of that team, and having that realization of what you can contribute, and having been a captain, knowing when you have that insight, that wisdom, those relationships, that love, that's so powerful to have in the team. So I'm excited for then what that means for the likes of the rock star Georgia Plimmer in the change room, and what they've learned from you and what they can continue to take with them. It's pretty great.
Yeah, because it's a unique thing being a captain of a cricket team, because it's almost like the coach of a football team. You're in the team, but you're kind of not in the team as well, because you've got to make some hard calls on players at times.
Yeah, you do. And I guess I've been fortunate to captain, different teams and different environments as well. And it's picking up different pieces. And that's probably been a big thing from playing franchise cricket, is what works in one environment certainly doesn't work in another one. So you've got to be adaptable while still being authentic to your leadership self and yourself. So that's certainly been something that's continued to learn and grow on the way. But yeah, captaincy is such a unique and interesting job. There's always a different challenge. Doesn't matter if it's with a different team, a different environment. Like, there's always something that's going to challenge you and make you think hard about yourself. So, like, I'm certainly happy that I'm done with a T20 captaincy for New Zealand. But as you say, this was always part of the puzzle, I guess, was for me to be able to step away and help whoever that is that fills those shoes next, especially with the likes of Suze too. Like, I think about how lucky I was to have Suze still in the team. I mean, she captained the side for a number of years, and I still look up to her in terms of a leader. So I think that's a really important part with still a really young group, is to help that transition moving forward now.
I want to pick up on something you just said then about working across different franchises, being a leader in those different contexts. We've now got a WBBL that goes from 14 games to 10 games. The WPL, the 100, they're shorter than that. What do you take with you as a player and as a leader that allows you to navigate those different environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess at the end of the day, obviously the cricket's the most important, but for me, I've always had a really strong desire to want to have a sense of loyalty with whatever team I'm playing with, and I think sometimes that's a bit unique in franchise cricket. Again, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I see the men's game and it seems very much quite transactional, that it's you get paid to play, you go, you do a job and then you're done sort of thing, whereas the teams I play for, I try to really invest in why I'm playing for them and try and have a connection, whether it's to the area or the region or the people, and that's something that really sticks with me. So despite the tournament going from 14 to 10 games, which I think's a great thing, I think it's still really important to connect to the region, to the people, especially with players coming in and out of the side as well. Is, look, ideally you want to try to keep the same unit together, but that's never possible. So it's about how can you bind those people together and do that as quickly as possible, but in a way that's still genuine, because I think, again, learning from past mistakes, there's times where I've tried to do that and it's felt really forced and probably haven't had the buy-in or the engagement from players. So, yeah, I think I've been really fortunate with the Scorchers that, having been here for a while, having played for WA prior to that as well, is I've got such a strong connection and such strong relationships that I can lean on the likes of, you know, obviously Beth Mooney, but Chloe Paparo, who's been an absolute stalwart of Western Australian cricket. So to have those relationships and to lean on them is something as well I've learned as a captain and as a leader, is you have to ask for help. I think certainly early on I thought I could do everything, be everyone to everything, and it's not possible. So certainly leaning on them is a big learning curve for me.
So from the Middle East to India, now to Australia for the WBBL season, you've just re-signed with the Scorchers for another 2 years. I would imagine that was an easy decision.
Yeah, it was. Oh, absolutely. I've loved my time in the Scorchers, and pretty happy to be able to pre-sign and not have to worry about going in the draft and, you know, all the kerfuffle that comes with that, to have that locked in and secured for the next 2 seasons. So, yeah, it means I can just sort of get stuck in and get my hands dirty.
Is there a bit of unfinished business? You got close last year and then had that poor final towards the end. Is that something that sort of sticks in your mind a little bit, a bit of redemption almost?
Oh, absolutely. I think, again, that's why you play these franchises and tournaments, isn't it? Is you want to win. And I think because we've had a little taste of it a couple of years ago, it drives you. I know that we've got the group, the squad to be able to reach that pinnacle again. It's now about how can we do that in a shorter tournament and making sure that we're playing good cricket. And you've made a really good point. We probably played some of our worst cricket at the most important time of the season. So how can we learn from that experience and make sure that we're building and consistently winning, because I think wins are so important in this with less games. So fingers crossed by the time we hopefully reach finals, we're really humming.
You talked about the leadership wisdom of Chloe Paparo. Beth Mooney signs for another 3 years. Alana King signs for another couple of years. Tell us a bit about the Scorchers squad. What are you looking forward to walking into this weekend?
Oh, I think the thing is the pride that they all have playing for the Scorchers, and you can really feel that. It really is a family feel out west. We get a bit of stick out west, we're sort of our own country out there, but the group is really tight, and I think it was awesome to see. Obviously, the first game they did so well defending probably a slightly below par score at the WACA. Most people sort of think, 150, 160 at least out there, but to see the grit and the resilience and for them to win in a different way to what probably people expect is something that, I'm really looking forward to coming back into. Obviously, Beth did a great job. I mean, I'm not sure what state I'll be in come Saturday, so she might have to help me with some of the decision-making, but that's the great thing is I think we've got obviously a lot of familiar faces in that group, but we've obviously got some new faces in there, which I'm really excited about. Obviously, we've got Michaela Hinkley over from the Heat, which I think's a great get for us, someone who's a bit more experienced, has played, finals cricket, has been in and around this tournament for a long time. And then you get the likes of Ebony Hoskin as well, who seems an absolute buzz. So I'm absolutely looking forward to joining up with her and, just bringing her into that Scorchers family.
Speaking of fast bowlers, Chloe Ainsworth, I think she was quoted as saying the other day, we don't really care how many runs we score, we'll just defend it. We trust ourselves to defend it. Dismissed two of the biggest names in the game in the same over the other night. Tell us a bit about her as a human being. She seems an absolute ripper.
Oh, she is a belter. I gave her the nickname Bulldozer, and I'm pretty sure you can tell why by the way that she absolutely steams down when she takes poles. But she is just such a great kid, and again, reminds me a little bit of myself as a younger player in terms of just has this infectious enthusiasm for the game that you just can't help but smile and want to get in behind her. And I mean, she is so talented. I think the scary thing is I don't think she quite knows how good she could be. And obviously, as you say, those 2 wickets that she took against Lanning and Sutherland, I mean, they're not bad players, and to absolutely rattle them, I've just got so much time for her, and she's always so keen to learn, to get better. But she loves cricket, and she just loves having fun, and that's something that I really like as a more experienced player. I won't say older, but as a more experienced player, you love seeing that with those younger kids in terms of they just want to get out there and run around and play with their mates. And that's what I love about playing with Dozer is that she just has this energy about her that she's just like, give me the ball, as you say. She's just, I don't care how many runs we've got. I'm gonna win us this game, which is such a cool attitude to have.
We were talking earlier in the program about the emergence of the young players, and we've only had a handful of matches, and already the youngsters are dominating. You've been in the competition now for such a long time. Is that the biggest change, the way that the younger players can come in and have an immediate impact?
Yeah, and I think it probably speaks to the wider resourcing of Cricket Australia and the domestic program, not just with the Big Bash, but the WNCL as well, and obviously they have the Spring Challenge too. You've seen it now for a number of years. I mean, you think back to Phoebe, who's now captain of the Thunder, and she was a 16-year-old hitting ramps and laps for 4 at North Sydney, and what she's going to go on to achieve. And as you say, like Kiva Bray, seeing her out there with Pez the other day, like it is such a cool thing. I probably do feel like a proud mum or something. I don't know why. I mean, I've got no connection whatsoever, but you really do feel this attachment to it because it really is a breeding ground for international cricketers. And as an overseas player, that's what you want these youngsters having the opportunity to play alongside their idols like Kiva did with Pez, but also to have the opportunity to go out and show their skills and sort of teach us old hags, what's the future is about to be like.
Yeah, we've got a couple of tough questions for both of you shortly, but have you got one final one for Sophie here, Kirby, before we get into it?
10 seasons of the WBBL. You've just mentioned quality internationals. You've mentioned resourcing. That means kids keep coming through. You've played for the Strikers. You've played for the Scorchers. What are just a couple of things that really stand out across those 10 seasons for you, Soph?
Well, that's a good question.
That is great. That's funny because the first thing I think of is playing double headers on the same day at Adelaide Oval number 2. That's what stands out to me is how far we've come from playing back-to-back games. I remember we played, I think it was in Wagga, in 40-degree heat, back-to-back day, and it's unbelievable to think that that's what we actually used to do, early days, to think now we're playing stadium series, trying to sell out, these big, huge grounds here in Australia. So to think of it in that space is so cool to see the growth, but also the professionalism surrounding the whole thing. It's not just the players and the athletes that have grown it, it's the structure and the support around it as well. And that's where I've got such great hope for this tournament, is that it gets the support from the administrators, the fans, everyone around it, the media, in terms of they've got a real role to play as well. Obviously, the players are central to that, but without the help and support of that, I mean, it'll fold pretty quickly. So that's a big one. The kit. I mean, I think, silly things. I remember feeling like we were playing in pajamas when you had the whole same colour thing. I mean, luckily I've picked the 2 best teams that have got the best kit. Sorry, Brisbane Heat. But, the Strikers and the Scorchers have got some pretty good kit. But, just crazy to think about how many people, players overseas, have been involved in this tournament and how it just continues to go from strength to strength.
Now, the problem is that now other countries are winning the World Cup as a result of it, Kirby. That's a problem.
Indeed, we've sold our souls.
That's right. All right, we're going to play a bit of a game. We're going to see how it goes. You know what it's like to open the batting, so you're opening the batting for us here with yes, no, wait. So I'm going to give you a couple of topics. This is for both of you, and you just quick answers. All right, so you can't sort of think about it too much. So the first one is, and I'll ask you this, Kirby, to start with, because it sort of does involve Sophie. Pre-signing process makes sense?
Yes.
No.
No. Right. You explain further. You've said it now.
I have. If I'm being completely honest,
Yeah.
I'd get away completely with pre-signing in the draft. I'd just go back to allowing players to choose where they want to go. It gives you clubs the opportunities to build teams and build loyalty. 100% understand the purpose of it, but for me, I'd just love to see it go back to players choosing where they want to go.
Very strong start. That's gone over the boundary for 6, that one. Beth Mooney to score most runs for a 4th year in a row.
I'm going to say wait.
Right, okay.
I'm saying waiting too.
Why, Kirby?
Give the girl a rest. I mean, she will be in the top run scorers. You have no doubt about that. It's that balance, isn't it, between the expectation of being the number one all the time. That's something that drives her. It probably is also something that exhausts her. I think she would also trade that out for a couple of Scorchers being in the top 10 and winning a title.
Is it a pressure for Beth that she has to deal with?
Yeah, I think exactly as Kirby said, it's probably a motivator but also a burden too. She's just got such calm head on her shoulders that you'd never know that, she's got the weight of the world in terms of that run scoring pressure. But yeah, I just think she'll be thereabouts, but it's also awesome to see other people. Obviously Pez has gone off with a hiss and a roar at the start, but I'm sure there'll be other people that step up as well.
The next one, the new 10-match WBBL season is a good call. Kirby?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, you sort of touched on it before as to why that's the case. Kirby, I'm interested in your thoughts as to why going back to 10 is good.
Yeah, I think the fundamental argument is, do you want to attract the best talent in the world, or are you trying to promote opportunity for domestic players? And I think if you want to continue to compete with the best leagues in the world, you want to attract the best players in the world. And that's where this product was born from. It was unique in that sense. In order to stay with and ahead of the pack, you can't demand that time. The international schedule is just immense. And I think the Spring Challenge is a step towards ensuring that there's still that pipeline for domestic talent whilst balancing trying to maintain being the best T20 domestic league in the world.
And as we were saying at the start here, we're sort of joking about how you've been to all these countries playing cricket. That's what the men have been doing for quite a while now, but now the women are doing it. And I think that's a good thing for the sport.
Oh, 100%. I think that's the path that we're going, but I also think we're in a really awesome opportunity in terms of that we can shape how it looks in terms of the international schedule as well, that we've still got windows where hopefully we can work together as both boards but also franchise leagues, that we can get the best people playing as much as possible, but also providing opportunities. Like, it's been so cool to obviously see the Bryce sisters, all of Prendergast over here. Like, it's so cool to see those players given the opportunity too.
All right. Last one for this segment here. With 103 dismissals and counting in the WBBL, Georgia Redmayne is one of the most underrated cricketers in Australia. Probably should start with Kirby here.
Waiting.
Not quite.
I wouldn't say underrated. I'd say she's part of a generation of immense talent. I don't think anyone doesn't know that she's good. We've seen her go over and win a title with the London Spirit in the 100 this year, play in the CPL. She gets lots of opportunities. She just happens to be part of a generation with Healy and Mooney that are also in it. So chronologically, maybe it's her parents' fault about when that all panned out. But I don't think she's underrated. I think people know she's good. I just think she's unlucky. It's like, how many gold medals would Grant Hackett have won if he wasn't in the same vintage as Ian Thorpe?
What do you reckon?
I'm completely with Kirbs there. I think it's just unfortunate timing that she just so happens to be in an era where there's two outstanding keeper batters. One's captain and one's, one of the most consistent players in the world.
All right, fair enough. Well done. Now, you're going to stick with us for a little bit longer. We're going to have our final segment next. You're listening to The Surge.
Yes, Gemma! Oh, yes, Gem!
Oh, straight between the legs. A little nutmeg, a little duck goose.
So we sometimes see some unusual things, Kirby, on the cricket field, but that one from Gemma Barsby might just take the cake, and we've only just started the tournament.
Yeah, unbelievable. Gemma Barsby up to her usual tricks, and her old skipper in Jess Jonathan, Queensland teammates from a long time ago, played a lot of underage cricket together, and classic Gemma stirring. It was kind of a, primary school ball games vibe, the old crawl through the legs.
Now, you're on the other side of the world, but you have seen it. What were your thoughts looking at it for the first time?
Well, lucky that Gemma's a little bit smaller, because if I tried doing that, JJ wouldn't stand a chance. So, as you say, it doesn't surprise me. Gemma just absolutely taking the mickey.
So what we're doing in this as part of the Surge is having a look at some of the things that have caught our eye over the course of the last week. Nicole Fulton's another one, dancing in the dugout, changing colours, but seems to be pretty comfortable in her new surroundings, Kirby.
Yeah, there's a couple of stars that have changed colours to the red across Melbourne town, and I think Nick Fulton's got a bit of a reputation for being reasonable on the dance floor, so not too surprising that when the right tune came on in the dugout, she got around it.
And what did you see? What caught your eye?
Well, Meg Lanning, I have an interesting question for the skipper over here who's about to step down from her New Zealand responsibilities. Meg Lanning is now fielding on the boundary, Sophie Devine. So I'm just wondering whether she's setting a precedent for those who are still part of high-performing teams, that servant leadership and cutting some laps around the rope.
Oh, 100%. If you ask Susie Bates, she cannot wait to get out onto the boundary. That was one of her reasons for, I think, giving up the captaincy, was so that she could go back out on the boundary. So I think you'll actually see it happen a lot more with captains anyway, is that they'll end up back out there. And obviously Meg's a great fielder, so quick across the ground and still has a shoulder on her, surprisingly, with how many surgeries and things she's had on it. So she's doing well.
She couldn't throw from the ring there for a while.
And on her shoulders as well for a long time. All right, so there's a few things that have caught our eye. Now, quick singles. This is the last segment before we finish the Surge, our first episode. I'm going to start with the Renegades. Now, what do we make of the Renegades? A lot of change there this year under Simon Helmut, but what do you think will happen with the team in red as the season progresses?
Yeah, there's a lot of elite parts to that team, and they just haven't quite found a way to put it all together. And
they look exciting on paper.
Yeah, they are, and they're good people. They're good team people as well. So it's a bit confusing to me at the moment why it hasn't yet come together. I know they've only played a couple of games. In the first one, they were particularly close, and it was a Perry masterclass really that meant that was a loss, but probably not their best selves against the Brisbane Heat in that second game up at Allan Border Field. So it's a question mark for me. I can't quite work out what's not working because the ingredients are great.
It's a tough start. They've been on the road for their first couple of games. They're a team, I would imagine, as an opponent, you're always got to be wary of with what they've got in their team.
Oh, absolutely. As Kirby said, they've got talent throughout that lineup. And, I was absolutely devastated to see Taylor obviously injure herself, because I think it was going to be the first time that herself, Sophie Molyneux and Georgia Wareham were going to play on the same side again for a number of years. But it is. They're always a group that look like they have fun. They've got great connection with each other. And I know when that does click, they're going to be a proper dangerous side.
Absolutely. Now, Amanda Jade Wellington took her 150th WBBL wicket this week, which is equal with Strano she is now on 151, with only Jonathan ahead of her on 164. Who's going to end up with most wickets out of those three?
Oh, look, I think Wello, she's obviously got a few years on both Strano and JJ, and she's a quality bowler. I think I heard a stat around how many stumpings she's got compared to other spinners, and it's ridiculous. And I just hope that each wicket she doesn't get a new necklace, because I'm not sure how she's going to be able to keep her head up in the future seasons.
What do you reckon, Kirby?
Yeah, I think the benefit of youth there, she's an extraordinary, talk about underrated cricketers. Again, she's not underrated. She's just underutilised at international level because, again, there's just so much talent in the leg spinning department in Australia. But I think, yeah, just extra years, extra games, and she'll take a lot more wickets.
It goes to our last quick single, which is around leg spinners around the WBBL. There's plenty of them. What makes it hard to play leg spin?
I think any time that you have the ball spinning away from you as a right-hander, it's always a huge threat. That's why left-arm orthodox spinners as well are so effective. Sophie Devine in the international scene. But it's such a difficult art form, and when you've got the skill, and I think the great thing about, as you say, the leg spinners in this competition is they're so different as well. You've got, I guess, Amanda Jade that, really gets some good revs on the ball, doesn't mind tossing it up. Then you've got Georgia Wareham, who's probably a little bit flatter, attacks the pads. And then you've got Kingy, who's probably a hybrid of both of them that wants to give the ball a good fizz, but she can also attack the pads and be used in different phases. And I think that what makes it so cool is you've got these different bowlers that can bowl in different phases, despite it being the hardest, I think, bowling skill by a country mile.
And it does feel like, Kirby, that the captains are happy to give the leggies the ball in the power play. And, it's a risk, but it also can be very, very rewarding.
I think So's point's really valid. They can be utilised in all phases of the game, and that's really powerful. You mate Millie Kurt, she's been going all right too, just quietly. She moves to the sixes. Grace Parsons gets found by the heat. So there's so many of them around the country, and I think it's that risk-reward thing, but the craft of those players in particular, and they just keep getting produced, means they're brave enough to take the risk knowing that they will also take wickets. There's almost a level of acceptance by the captain and the bowler that, yeah, you might go for some boundaries, but I also know that you're one of my best wicket-taking prospects as well.
Is that the key from a captaincy point of view, Sophie, those early wickets in the power play, how that really does set a game up?
Oh, 100%. And I think I'm probably not too massive on stats, but you look at, how many wickets you can get in the power play and how that can set teams back, and especially with the lineups that you've got, that batting goes so deep. But if you can make a dent in that within the first 4 overs, it can be so important in terms of slowing down run rates, but also, trying to restrict teams. So absolutely, you want to be as attacking as you can, and whether that's using a leg spinner or a young gun like Chloe Ainsworth who can bulldoze her way through, it's I guess that's how you have to manage that and how you want to go about being attacking in the power play.
All right, before we go, a bit of housekeeping. Don't forget to download the Big Bash app. Download the Big Bash app for live scores, instant highlights and behind-the-scenes content. And also the BKT Big Bash tipping competition where you can win $1,000 a week, and there is a $10,000 overall prize. And don't forget, you can also have bragging rights among your family, your friends and your teammates as well. Really appreciate you coming in. To come off the plane to join us to have a chat is pretty incredible. You start this weekend. It's going to be great to see you in action here in Australia.
Awesome. Thanks heaps for having me, guys.
Sophie Devine, the star of the Scorchers. And Kirby, we've got through our first show. Do you think we've gone all right?
I think we made it. We did well.
We
Whitey,
did.
good job.
Well done. Great stuff. I hope you've enjoyed the first edition of The Surge. We'll catch you again next week.